Welcome back to the show, everybody. Thank you for staying with us. Now it's time for the hot seat. And in the hot seat today, we have a good friend of mine. He's a water resources engineering consultant, and he goes by the name Mr. Ibrahim Toure. Welcome, Ibrahim Toure, to the show, ladies and gentlemen. How you doing, Ibrahim? How are you?
I'm great.
Good to see you, man. Good to see you. Looking good, as usual. Right?
I try to be like you.
What's going on, man?
I'm all right, thanks.
So the reason why I got you on the show today is because as a water, resource engineering consultant, I've noticed that over the last few days or few months, there's been a lot of floods all over the place, Like, now, before we get into that, can you tell our viewers who you are, Mr. Ibrahim Toure?
Well, I'm an African American, I suppose. That's how I like to define myself.
Whatever that means, yeah.
Well, hey, I think that fits me perfectly because I'm African origin. My folks are from Senegal and Guinea.
Okay.
I was born in the United States.
Wow.
That makes me an American. But I did grow up partially in Africa, enough to have a good cultural entrenchment in the African cultures.
That's
as
a good,
you know.
Well.
So when you say African American, you really talk about me.
It fits perfectly.
Yeah.
You have one leg in Africa, one leg in America, so and then the
So
culture.
sometimes I feel like an African with an American citizenship. Sometimes I feel like an American of African origins.
Okay, that's good.
So
that's good.
Anywhere in between those lines,
that works, right?
That works for me.
Okay, that's good. Now, how do you get involved, into these water, resource and engineering projects?
Well, my background, first of all, I'm a civil engineer, and I've been working in the private sector in the United States as a transportation engineer and mostly as a water resources engineer.
Okay.
Now, what is a water resources engineer? It's an engineer that manages the resources, that precious resource called water, for the benefit of a group of individuals or individuals. The minute you have individuals come together in the form of a city or a village of a certain size, then the issue of access to water and the use of water becomes very critical.
Hey, I know there's a lot of wars, man, that's been going on because of...
You heard about that?
Absolutely.
Well, you look at a river anywhere, and then if there's a country upstream of that river and a country downstream of that river, if the country upstream decides to control the resources, there's a potential for conflict right there.
And I think there's something like that going on between Sudan and Mali, somewhere in Africa where, or Chad, something like that.
Well, very recently I was in Holland attending a conference. Why in Holland? Because the Netherlands is known to be maybe one of the world's most potent centers of water knowledge.
Okay.
And there was a meeting there with a few officials of 11 different countries that share the Nile waters in common.
Oh, the Nile,
Up until very recently, the Nile waters were controlled, 87% of those waters were controlled by Egypt, and they're trying to establish an equilibrium so that the waters can be more equally shared by all the countries
that's true.
that have the precious need of that precious resource.
Absolutely.
So yeah, there are a lot of issues that if water is not managed properly, not only conflicts can arise, but the mismanagement of water can cause floods, can cause waterborne diseases, scarcity of water in rural areas in Africa a lot.
Let's in Ethiopia, they have all these droughts.
Droughts in Nigeria this year had a drought.
Really?
A very serious drought going on. We're talking about famine. The country's in dire need of some help. And a lot of it has to do with non-access to water.
Now, you spoke about the Netherlands, and one thing that you told me when we was backstage speaking the other day, it's like Holland, the Netherlands are actually what, 10 feet below?
About two-thirds of that country is about 2, 3, up to 10 feet under the sea level.
Okay.
So for the past 400 or 500 years, these people have been forced to deal with the issues of how to manage the water to avoid flood and to use it in an optimum way for their society to flourish. That is why 400 years later, they're known as the world specialists.
Well, but see, and this is one thing I don't understand. Why didn't the people, that was in charge of building the levees in New Orleans, didn't go to those people? I mean, they have so vast experience as far as, managing the water. And then this city just got flooded like that because the levees, couldn't stand. Why didn't they go to the Netherlands and ask them for their expertise?
Well, if you ask the engineering community, the issue was not an issue of engineering. It was more an issue of political will.
Okay.
In other words, the United States is not a country that lacks knowledge and resources to tackle and to mitigate any issues related to water in this country. Not to say that they don't need the Netherlands expertise, but there's enough people here who know what to do and how to do it. As far as the levees of New Orleans are
yeah.
concerned, there have been a lot of engineers that under the radar have been pulling the alarm and saying, listen, we need to update the system, we need to upgrade to look.
Nobody listened, man.
It unfortunately fell in a time where in this country deregulation was the norm, and and it takes a lot of resources to manage the water properly for the benefit of the most. So it was more, let's say, a problem of political will than engineering know-how.
Okay, okay. Now, how has it been for you, you know, being involved in this field for all over these years?
Oh, there's a mystical aspect as far as I'm concerned, being involved in water. I don't want to go as far as saying that I'm in love with Mami Wata, like they say in Africa.
Mami Wata.
You know that water is used not only for survival, but also for ritualistic purposes, for cleaning, for irrigation. 2/3 of the fresh water that we use in the world are used for growing food.
Okay.
And the rest is used for recreational, drinking, distribution, and quality management. If you'll allow me to say, just to underline how precious this resource is, about 97% of the water on this globe is salt water.
Okay.
So cannot be used for human consumption as is.
We gotta
so we really have 3% of the water on the world that we can directly use as fresh water, 2% of which is under the form of snow or glaciers up north.
Wow, so we only left with 1%.
With 1%. So it is very critical that we manage it well. Managing it well means distributing it well to accumulations of people.
Okay.
Collecting very well not only the storm water, but also the industrial and domestic used waters, and also making sure that the waters that are collected, that are polluted, are treated properly before being rejected into the estuaries.
Okay, okay. Now, you know, and every time I have, you know, people on this show to talk about subject matters, you know, different subject matters, I always want to bring it back to Africa. Now, my understanding is that you're going back to Africa.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm not only American, I'm also African
too. Okay.
I have accumulated over the past 12 years a lot of experience in the private sector. We use the private sector in particular. We are very keen on using technology to do a lot of modeling of systems, to be able to assess situations over a big basin for what they are, and then bring solutions and test these solutions in face of events before anything is even being built.
Right, but it
does cost money, but at least it prevents you from doing the wrong things like building big dams or repiping a whole system without you knowing the real impact that it will have.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like a lot of our brothers and sisters over there in Africa, you know, people in charge, they are more reactive than they are active. Am I wrong?
I am so glad you said that, because that's exactly what I've noticed in my recent trips to Africa. It's much easier to convince a politician to put monies into solving a crisis that has just occurred than convincing them to put monies, and we're talking substantial amounts, to build systems to prevent something from happening. As of course, from an engineering perspective, that's the thing to do, because what you're trying to do is to make sure that, you know, the population, the public, is being protected by the design.